Classical works are smothered in details that are both very important and very distracting. There's so much variety in things like articulation. You might have normal quarter notes, or some with dots, or under slurs, or both. On top of that, there's accents, tenuto markings, portato figures, all of which vary depending on the context. And then of course you got dynamics. You got your basic pianoforte and variations of those, but there's words in other languages. You gotta Google stuff in German, French, and Italian. Plus there's tempo changes, pedal markings, rhythm that might include complicated meter changes, and sometimes there's repeats, so you gotta decide whether you really do them all or what to do differently if you take the repeat. Plus just the sheer amount of notes in a piece can be overwhelming. Look at this page. How do you survive this? You don't, you give up. The key to dealing with any of these details lies in the bigger picture. Let's back up a second. Remember, this music is old. Really, really old. Because of that, we respect it naturally, and we should to a certain degree. It stood the test of time for a reason, but a lot of teachers preach that the performer should be a slave to the written score, like it's this ancient religious text that we need to dedicate our lives to deciphering. Let's get over that. They're basically sketches, and some of them are more clear than others. Just because a composer has a profound idea doesn't mean they're geniuses at communicating it. It's more like a recipe, and as a performer, you're the chef cooking the meal. You didn't invent it, but for the dish to have any chance at greatness, you gotta make it with the same love and commitment as a person who did. Follow the details? Absolutely. Trust what's written down. But maybe you're like, needs a little salt. Or, hey, if I added half a lemon, the flavors are just gonna pop even more. Trust yourself to make adjustments that serve to bring out what the music's already trying to say. Mozart's a good example of a composer whose music relies on plenty of imagination from the performer, or it'll sound dull. Look at this solo in the second movement of this concerto. Okay, how do we approach this? I'm seeing hardly any details here except a few slurs, no dynamics, no crescendos, no emotional words from Mozart to help us with the character, so what do? Well, what do we have? The left hand is playing this very simple accompaniment in a higher register than usual, underneath an ornamented rising melody. So the left-hand texture is sparse and thin, basically just providing a floating harmony underneath his singing voice. Mozart's basically imitating an aria here. The melody's rising each bar as the bass descends, and as the bottom and top get further apart, the melody finally reaches its peak before descending again. So, I can write all that stuff in if I wanted to, but honestly, when I see a blank canvas like this that doesn't micromanage my phrasing, my shoulders drop, I feel relaxed, and I feel like I'm given the liberty I need to sing it my way. As long as I have the basic idea, sing the right hand with some freedom, keep the left hand quiet but supportive, grow in intensity as it gets higher, then I can play it in a way that feels like me and not like I'm following instructions. Let's look at the opening of the last movement, which is a big piano solo. Barely any markings here except for some slurs in measure 29. Okay, so again, what do we have? Well, we have the notes themselves, which actually give us the key, the texture, the register, how often the harmony changes. We also have the tempo. So all these things together are enough to give us the character or the mood for the music, and it's going to help us fill in those details. The opening seems pretty bombastic. It's got octaves in the left hand, the tempo's really fast, the harmony is super simple, just alternating between the 1 chord and the 5 chord. It seems celebratory, jubilant, fun, exciting. So I'm gonna play a comfortable mezzo forte or forte, and when there's a shift in the harmony, like he's doing something different or it's going somewhere else, I'm gonna bring that out. You can gather a lot of details without them being spoon-fed by the composer. Harmony, texture, tempo, time period, genre, all these help give you a mood or a musical environment that you can work inwards from. Personally, I usually prefer less detail in scores because it offers trust from the composer that I'll know how to make it mine. That's why it can be so fulfilling to work on these older scores by composers like Bach, Handel, Haydn, No. Don't. No! Beethoven revolutionized music, but it came at a big price for the performer. Technically way harder music, unforgiving tempos, hardly any expressive freedom, and I mean he does not trust you at all to do the right thing. This guy micromanages the performer to death. And this is going to create a legacy for other composers to do the same. The thing is, he has to be brutally specific because he is revolutionary. The music goes against the grain, so your first instincts and assumptions are going to be wrong, especially if you're living in the 18th century and you're used to Haydn and Mozart. Take a look at this passage in one of Beethoven's early sonatas, Opus 2 No. 1. I've stripped away his dynamics, and I'm going to try to show what kind of rendition might be expected from a musician around his time. Okay, now here's what Beethoven marked. He's unpredictable and he often works in extremes, so it makes sense that marking things emphatically would ensure that the performer understands it's really what he meant. If you paint too broad a brush with his music, you really miss the essence of his characters. Thinking about the pros and cons of detail in scores reminds me of Socrates' speech about writing versus dialectic discussion from Plato's dialogue Phaedrus. Once you write something down, it's set in stone. It'll last longer, but it can't react to criticism, evolve with reception, or tailor itself to individuals. Writings are silent, while in-person dialogue is more of a living, breathing thing. These ideas speak to the inherent flaws of written material in conveying meaning or truth. But if you play any newer music at all, you know that writing scores can be an art form in itself. Some scores completely stun me in the way they're able to convey a work's character or message without me needing to read a single note or detail. Maybe Beethoven was trying to experiment with score writing too. It seems like he found the notation of his time really inadequate, and he did his best with what he had. I think a performance of Beethoven's work that would impress Beethoven wouldn't be a recreation of what he heard in his head, but a fresh rendition that offers an earnest, colorful realization of the black and white sketch that he made. Too much notation can cripple your sense of freedom and expression as a performer, and not enough can lead to a watered-down interpretation. Instead of letting either of those over-influence your playing, remember your role as the chef. You've got the ingredients and a recipe with some guidelines and suggestions in front of you. Put it all together and be the last piece of the puzzle centuries later in bringing these ideas back to life.